The airplane moved smoothly through the night sky, its cabin filled with the soft hum of engines. Most passengers were asleep, their heads resting against the seats. In seat 8A, a young woman named Myra was quietly asleep. Her dark hair fell across her face, and her hands were folded neatly on her lap. To anyone passing by, she looked like an ordinary traveler returning from a long trip. But the man sitting across the aisle knew better. He had studied the passenger list carefully before boarding. His name was Captain Ryan, a SEAL officer who had been called back from leave only 2 days ago. At first, he had not believed the message that came through his encrypted device. It spoke of a hidden pilot, someone who was more important than anyone realized. A pilot who held knowledge that could change the balance of power in the skies. That pilot, the message said, was Myra, and she would be seated in 8A on this very flight. Ryan kept his eyes on her, though his body appeared relaxed. Years of training had taught him how to blend into any crowd, but his senses were always sharp. He could tell she was not just sleeping. Her breathing was steady, almost too steady, as if she were controlling it even in rest. Her posture was calm, but not careless. It was the kind of rest a soldier or trained flyer might take ready to wake at a moment's notice. The cabin lights dimmed further as the flight attendants moved to the back. A few rows ahead, a man got up and walked slowly toward the lavatory, but Ryan noticed his hands tremble as he touched the seat backs. He scanned the cabin again and saw 2 more men who had boarded with light jackets, though the weather outside had been hot. Something about them felt wrong. Ryan leaned back in his seat, his hand close to the small bag under his feet. He had no weapon, at least not in the usual sense, but inside the bag was a secure communicator and a small device designed to disrupt signals. He hoped he would not need them. Myra shifted slightly in her sleep, and for the first time Ryan saw her face more clearly. She looked younger than he had expected, maybe in her mid-20s, but there was something strong in her features. She was not just any pilot. According to the message, she had flown missions others thought impossible. She had landed a damaged craft in a storm that should have torn it apart. She had guided transport ships through hostile zones without a single loss. And now, for reasons unknown, she was hidden away on a passenger flight as if she were just another traveler. Ryan's thoughts were interrupted when the first man returned from the lavatory. But instead of sitting down, he stopped near the cockpit door. His eyes met those of the other 2 men. The signal was clear. They were about to make their move. Ryan's muscles tensed. He could act now, but one mistake could put every passenger in danger. The crew had not yet noticed. Time was running out. He looked back at Myra, still asleep in 8A. The message had been clear, she was the key. But why? And did she even know what was about to happen? The first man reached inside his jacket, and Ryan knew the moment had come. He stood up quickly, his voice strong and commanding, cutting through the silence of the cabin. "Wake up, pilot," he shouted. Myra's eyes opened instantly, sharp and alert. For a moment, she did not move, only studied him with a gaze that was far from confused. Then she turned her head slightly and saw the men near the cockpit door. Her hands tightened on the armrests, but she did not panic. Ryan stepped into the aisle, blocking the path of the men. Passengers began to stir, confused by the sudden noise. The flight attendants rushed forward, unsure of what was happening. The cabin felt heavy with tension. Myra slowly rose from her seat, her calm movements almost unnatural for someone just woken from sleep. She looked at Ryan, then at the men ahead, and finally at the cockpit door. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. Then Myra spoke, her voice steady. "What do you need me to do?" Ryan gave a short nod. The message had been right. She was no ordinary traveler. She was the one they needed, the one who could change what was about to happen in the skies tonight. The first man pulled something from his jacket, and the cabin erupted with shouts. Passengers screamed, flight attendants ducked, and chaos began to spread. But in the middle of it all, Myra stood calm, her eyes fixed on the threat ahead. Ryan took a step closer to her, his voice low but urgent. "Stay ready. This flight depends on you." Myra gave the smallest of nods, and in that moment Ryan knew the night sky would soon become far more dangerous than anyone on board had imagined. The cabin was no longer quiet. Passengers were wide awake now, their voices rising in fear and confusion. The man near the cockpit door shouted something in a sharp tone, waving a device in his hand. The two others moved down the aisle, their faces tense and focused. The plane was still steady in the air, but inside it felt like a storm had broken loose. Ryan kept himself between the men and the rest of the passengers. His stance was calm but firm, showing he was ready if they came closer. Years of training told him not to rush, not to act too soon. He needed to see what they wanted and why Myra was the key. Myra, standing now in seat 8A, looked different than before. A moment ago she had been asleep like everyone else. Now she carried herself with a quiet strength. Her eyes followed every movement of the men, calculating, as if she was already reading their plan. The first man waved his device again, this time pointing it toward the cockpit door. He barked an order for the pilots to open. The flight attendants froze, unsure what to do. One of them tried to calm the passengers, telling them to stay seated, but her voice shook. Ryan spoke in a steady tone, his voice carrying across the aisle. "Think carefully about what you're doing. There's no way out if you make a mistake." The man glared at him, but did not respond. Instead, the second man stepped forward, trying to push past Ryan. Ryan blocked him with his shoulder, not striking, only standing firm like a wall. The man pushed harder, but Ryan did not move. Behind them, Myra whispered just loud enough for Ryan to hear. "They are not here for the passengers. They want control of the plane." Ryan tilted his head slightly toward her, keeping his eyes on the threat. "And you? Why do they need you?" Myra's voice was calm. "Because I can fly it better than anyone else. If they want to take this plane, they need me alive." Her words carried weight, and Ryan understood now. She was not only a skilled pilot, she was the pilot. The kind who could take a plane through conditions no one else could survive. That was why the message had called her the key. The third man pulled something from his jacket, a small device with blinking lights. Passengers gasped and pulled back in fear. Ryan recognized it at once, not a weapon to harm but a jammer, designed to block signals from the cockpit or ground. These men wanted silence between the pilots and the outside world. Myra saw it too. Her eyes narrowed. "They will cut us off from control." Ryan shifted slightly, lowering his voice. "Can you override it?" She hesitated. "If I can reach the cockpit, yes. But not from here." The first man shouted again, ordering the cockpit door to be opened. His voice was growing louder, more impatient. The flight crew still hesitated, knowing the rules said the door must stay locked during flight. Passengers whispered nervously, some covering their faces, others clutching their armrests. The cabin was tense, like a string pulled too tight. Ryan raised his voice again, speaking not just to the men but to everyone listening. "Stay calm. Do not move unless you have to." His words carried confidence, and even in the chaos, some passengers found comfort in his tone. The second man tried again to force his way forward, but Ryan stepped closer, his stance strong. "You don't want to do this," Ryan said firmly. "You know who I am." The man paused, uncertainty flashing in his eyes. He did not know for sure, but he could sense Ryan was not an ordinary passenger. Myra took that moment to act. She reached into the seat pocket in front of her and pulled out a small metal pen. Holding it like a tool, she slipped it into her sleeve, keeping it hidden. She leaned closer to Ryan and whispered, "We need a distraction. 10 seconds will be enough." Ryan gave a short nod. He understood. The first man grew impatient and turned his head to shout again. That was the moment Ryan moved. He shifted his weight and shoved the second man backward, hard enough to knock him against a seat. The passengers gasped, some ducking down, others calling out. At the same time, Myra slipped past Ryan, quick and smooth, her movements practiced like someone used to moving in tight spaces. She darted toward the cockpit, her eyes locked on the door. The first man saw her and reached out, but Ryan blocked him, their shoulders colliding in the narrow aisle. The struggle was not loud, but it was powerful. Myra reached the cockpit door and tapped a quick sequence on the small control pad beside it. To the surprise of everyone watching, the lock clicked open. She slipped inside, closing the door behind her just as the men tried to reach her. The passengers erupted in nervous voices, some cheering, others frightened. Ryan held his ground, his eyes never leaving the men. The plan was no longer theirs. Inside the cockpit, Myra slid into the co-pilot's seat. The two flight crew stared at her in shock, unsure who she was or how she had unlocked the door. She spoke with calm authority. "I am Myra. Do not ask questions. Keep flying steady. We have intruders in the cabin, and they are about to shut down your systems. I know how to stop them." The pilots exchanged quick glances, realizing she was not just a passenger. Her tone left no space for doubt. Back in the cabin, Ryan faced the men alone. His voice was steady as he spoke. "It's over. The pilot is awake." Inside the cockpit, Myra's hands moved quickly over the controls. She was calm, but her eyes showed deep focus. The two pilots were still shocked by her sudden entrance, yet they could see she knew exactly what she was doing. One of the pilots, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, asked in a low voice, "Who are you?" Myra did not look up. "I am the reason this flight is still safe. There are intruders trying to cut off your systems. If they succeed, you will lose contact with the ground and control will slip away. I can stop them, but I need your trust." The pilots exchanged uneasy glances. Trusting a stranger in the cockpit went against every rule, but there was something in her tone that left no space for doubt. Slowly, the captain of the flight nodded. "Do what you must." Myra pressed a sequence on the communication panel, but as she expected, the signal was already weak. The jammer was active. She sighed softly. "They are ahead of us. I will need to reroute through backup channels." Meanwhile, outside the cockpit door, Ryan faced the three men. Passengers were frightened, but no one moved, waiting to see what would happen. The first man, clearly the leader, glared at Ryan. "You should have stayed out of this," the man said sharply. Ryan's tone was steady. "And let you take control of the plane? Not going to happen." The second man, still shaken from being shoved earlier, whispered something to the leader. Ryan could not hear the words, but he saw the leader's hand tighten around the device. The blinking lights grew faster. Ryan understood. They were preparing to fully block the cockpit systems. He had to buy Myra more time. He raised his voice, speaking directly to the passengers. "Stay low, stay calm. Do not panic." His strong tone steadied many of them, even as fear filled their eyes. The leader took a step forward. "You cannot protect them all. Move aside." Ryan stood firm. "You don't know who you're dealing with." The two men flanked him, trying to push past, but Ryan's training showed. He shifted smoothly, using his body to block them without throwing punches. Every movement was controlled. His goal was not to hurt but to delay. Inside the cockpit, Myra worked quickly. Her fingers moved across hidden panels the pilots had rarely touched. She opened backup channels buried deep in the system. A faint signal came alive on the screen. She exhaled in relief. She spoke into the headset, her voice clear. "This is Myra on Flight 27. Cabin compromised. Intruders present. Systems under attack. Requesting immediate response." There was a long pause, only static in her ear. Then a faint voice replied, "We read you, Myra. Hold steady. Response is on the way." Her chest tightened with relief, but she knew it was not over. The signal was weak, and if the jammer grew stronger, even this link would vanish. She turned to the pilots. "Keep steady course. Do not change altitude unless I say." The captain nodded. His voice was tense. "Who are those men? What do they want?" Myra's eyes darkened. "They are not ordinary hijackers. They know about me. And if they succeed, they will not only take this plane, they will take the knowledge I carry." Back in the cabin, Ryan kept his eyes on the leader. Passengers whispered behind him, their fear building. The leader finally snapped and pushed forward hard, trying to get to the cockpit door. Ryan stepped in, blocking him again, this time grabbing his arm and twisting it just enough to force the device down. The leader struggled, but Ryan's grip was unshakable. The second man lunged forward, but a brave passenger in the back shouted, "Stay away from him." The sudden voice broke the silence, giving Ryan the moment he needed. He pushed the leader back into the aisle, sending the device clattering onto a seat. The blinking slowed. Passengers gasped, but none dared to move toward it. The third man bent quickly to retrieve it, but Ryan stepped between them, his body a shield. "It's over," he said firmly, though he knew it was not yet true. The leader's eyes burned with frustration. "You think you can stop us? She will not save you." Ryan's jaw tightened. "She already has." At that moment, Myra's voice came from the cockpit speaker, clear and calm. "This is Myra. Systems are back online. Ground control has been notified. Reinforcements are coming." The leader froze, his plan collapsing. The passengers heard her words and a ripple of relief passed through the cabin. But Ryan did not relax. He knew men like these never gave up so easily. The leader's face confirmed his thought: the mission was not finished. The second man hissed, "We still have one chance." His eyes darted toward the luggage compartments above, as if something hidden there was waiting. Ryan caught the look and his instincts sharpened. Whatever they had prepared, it was not just about the jammer. He spoke loudly to Myra through the door. "Check the cargo hold. Now." Inside, Myra's eyes widened. She understood immediately. If the intruders had placed something in the hold, it could mean far greater danger than anyone realized. She turned to the pilots. "We must scan the cargo systems now." As she pulled up the data, Ryan stood firm in the cabin, his heart steady but his mind alert. The night was far from over. Whatever was hidden in this plane, it was about to change everything. Inside the cockpit, Myra's eyes moved quickly across the control screens. She pressed a series of commands that opened the cargo monitoring system. At first, the numbers looked normal: weight balance, temperature, air pressure. But then, on the far side of the display, a blinking red mark appeared. A container was drawing power, though it should not have been. Her voice was sharp but controlled. "There is something in the cargo hold. A container is active. That is what they are hiding." The captain of the flight leaned forward, his face pale. "Active? What does that mean?" Myra shook her head. "I don't know yet. But if it is drawing power, it is no ordinary cargo." Back in the cabin, Ryan kept his body between the intruders and the cockpit. His eyes stayed on the leader, who smirked despite losing the jammer. The smirk told Ryan everything: these men still believed the plane was theirs. The leader finally spoke, his tone low but confident. "You cannot stop what is already in motion. That container will finish what we started. Ryan's stomach tightened. He knew Myra must have already discovered it. Now the race was against time. Passengers shifted nervously, whispering to one another. Fear filled the cabin again. Ryan raised his voice firmly. Stay calm. Stay seated. No one moves until we know what we're dealing with. His steady tone helped keep panic from breaking loose, though many faces were pale with worry. Inside the cockpit, Myra typed in more commands. The system gave her limited information, but enough to confirm her fear. The container was not listed in the official cargo manifest. It had been loaded in secret. Worse, it was connected to the plane's power supply. She turned to the pilots. I need access to the manual override. We must cut the power link before it activates fully. The younger co-pilot looked nervous. If we cut power to the wrong system, it could destabilize the flight. Myra's eyes stayed sharp. Then we cut carefully. We don't have another choice. Her fingers flew across the panel. The pilots followed her lead, realizing quickly that she was not only skilled but deeply familiar with systems beyond their own training. Meanwhile, in the cabin, Ryan made his move. He bent quickly and picked up the jammer from the seat before the third man could grab it. The device was small and heavy, with blinking lights across its surface. Ryan pressed a button on the side, and the lights went dark. The leader growled in frustration. You don't understand. That was only the first step. The container below is already prepared. Ryan's tone was cold. Then you've underestimated us. Because she is already inside the cockpit, and she will stop it? The leader's smirk faltered for the first time. He knew Myra was no ordinary flyer, and his eyes flicked toward the cockpit door with growing unease. Inside, Myra located the override. She pulled a small switch from beneath the panel and handed it to the captain. Hold steady while I reroute. On my signal, cut the power. The captain's hands trembled slightly, but he nodded. The system screen flashed warnings as Myra isolated the power lines one by one. Finally, she spotted the connection leading to the suspicious container. Her breath tightened. Now, she ordered. The captain flipped the switch. The cockpit lights flickered for a moment, then steadied again. On the screen, the red mark vanished. The container's power draw dropped to 0. Myra exhaled slowly. It's disconnected. But relief was short. Another warning blinked onto the screen, this time from sensors in the cargo hold. The container had shifted and was releasing heat. Myra's voice hardened. It has a backup. They prepared for a disconnect. The co-pilot swallowed nervously. What does that mean? It means, Myra said, her voice calm but urgent, we must get to the hold. Someone must open it and shut it down from inside. Back in the cabin, Ryan felt the tension deepen. Myra's voice came over the cockpit speaker. Ryan, I need you in the cargo hold. There is a container releasing heat. If it continues, this flight will not survive. Passengers gasped in fear, but Ryan's face did not change. He had expected this. He turned to the leader. So this was your plan? Hide it where no one could reach in time. The leader only smiled faintly. Too late now. Ryan ignored him and spoke loudly for all to hear. I need a way to the lower deck. A flight attendant, still shaken but brave, pointed toward the rear of the plane. There is an access hatch near the galley. Ryan nodded firmly. He glanced once at Myra's seat, now empty, and whispered to himself, you'd better be right about this. With steady steps, he moved down the aisle, every eye in the cabin on him. The intruders tried to block him, but Ryan's stare was sharp and unyielding. Stand down, he ordered. Something in his voice made them hesitate. As Ryan reached the galley, a crew member unlocked the panel that led below. He opened it, revealing a narrow metal ladder that descended into the cargo hold. The hum of the engines filled the space, but beneath it Ryan thought he heard something else, an unnatural pulse, faint but steady, coming from below. He placed one hand on the ladder and looked back once at the passengers. "Stay calm. Keep quiet." Then he descended into the dim hold, the sound of the pulse growing stronger with each step. Above, Myra's voice reached him through the small communicator in his ear. "Be careful, Ryan. That container is not just dangerous cargo. It is something far more advanced than they want us to know." Ryan's jaw set as he reached the bottom, the shadows of the hold stretching around him. Ahead, the container sat against the wall, its metal surface glowing faintly with heat. The night sky outside was calm, but inside the cargo hold of Flight 27, the true danger had just begun. The cargo hold was dim and quiet except for the steady hum of the engines above. Ryan's boots touched the metal floor, and his eyes adjusted to the low light. His training made him alert to every sound, every shadow. The container was easy to spot. It was larger than the others, standing in the far corner, its metal surface glowing faintly with heat. He approached slowly, his hand brushing the side of the narrow wall for balance. A low pulse came from the container, steady like a heartbeat, though no machine on a passenger flight should sound like that. Ryan tapped his communicator. "Myra, I see it. The container is hot and humming. What am I dealing with?" Her voice came calm but urgent through his earpiece. "Do not touch it directly. Check the control panel on the side. There should be a lock or a screen. Describe what you see." Ryan reached the front of the container and crouched down. A small panel blinked with faint lights. Strange symbols ran across the display, none he recognized. They were not in standard English, nor in any code he had seen in military use. He described them to Myra. There was silence for a moment, then she replied in a low voice. "Those are not normal transport codes. They are military grade, but not from our side. Ryan, this is not just dangerous cargo, it is stolen tech." Ryan frowned. "Tech for what?" Before Myra could answer, the container gave a low hiss. A thin line of steam escaped from the edges, and the hum grew louder. Ryan stepped back quickly. Myra's voice sharpened. "It is activating. You need to stop it now." Ryan studied the panel again. There were 3 small switches below the screen, one glowing brighter than the others. He reached toward it, then paused. Instinct told him not to guess. "Which one shuts it down?" he asked. Myra's voice was firm. "Middle switch. Pull it down and hold for 3 seconds. Do not let go until I say." Ryan did as she said. He pulled the switch down and counted silently. 1, 2, 3. The hum slowed slightly, but then a warning light flared red across the panel. The screen showed new symbols flashing faster. Myra muttered, "They built a fail-safe. If one control is stopped, another activates." "Ryan, look for a small slot beside the panel." Ryan found it, a narrow opening no wider than a card. Inside, a faint blue glow flickered. "That is it," Myra said quickly. "There is a core inside. You must remove it before it overheats." Ryan pulled a tool from his pocket, a small multi-purpose device he always carried. He slid it into the slot and felt resistance. He pressed harder until the core clicked loose. Carefully, he pulled it out. It was a small cylinder, glowing faint blue, warm in his hand. The hum from the container slowed, but the heat still radiated. Ryan spoke, "I have the core. But the container is still hot." Myra answered, "Good. Hold the core steady. Do not drop it. That is the heart of the system. Without it, the container cannot complete activation. Bring it up to me." Ryan turned, ready to climb the ladder back up, but then he froze. From the shadows on the far side of the hold, he heard footsteps. Slow, careful footsteps. He raised his head sharply. Myra, I am not alone down here. Above, Myra's voice grew tense. One of them must have followed you. From the darkness, the third intruder stepped into view. His jacket was gone, replaced with a small harness across his chest. His eyes locked on the core in Ryan's hand. You should not have touched that, the man said calmly. Give it back. Ryan tightened his grip on the glowing cylinder. Not going to happen. The man took a step closer, his tone cold. Do you even know what you are holding? That is not just a device. It is a prototype engine. With it, anyone can power a craft far beyond this generation. Hand it over, or this flight will not survive. Ryan's mind raced. A prototype engine? That explained why Myra had been called the key. She was the only one skilled enough to handle such technology. If the intruders took it, they could build weapons no one else could stop. Ryan kept his stance steady. If this is so valuable, then I am holding the only chance to keep it safe. The man lunged forward suddenly, but Ryan moved fast, stepping aside and gripping the ladder with his free hand. The intruder stumbled past him, then spun around, his eyes burning with frustration. Ryan climbed quickly, holding the cord tightly as he rose toward the galley hatch. The intruder leapt and grabbed at his leg, but Ryan kicked down hard, forcing the man to lose his grip. At the top, a flight attendant pulled him out with wide eyes. What is that? She whispered, staring at the glowing cylinder. Ryan only said, something we cannot lose. He looked toward the cabin. The leader and the second man were still standing, their faces tense. When they saw the core in Ryan's hand, their expressions turned sharp with fear and anger. Myra's voice came over the speaker again. Ryan, bring it to the cockpit now. Ryan moved forward, ignoring the intruders. Passengers parted to let him through, their eyes wide with both fear and hope. He reached the cockpit door, which opened quickly to let him inside. Myra stood waiting, her hand outstretched. Ryan placed the core into her palm. She studied it for a moment, then nodded with calm certainty. Yes. This is what they wanted. And now it is ours to protect. The pilots looked at her in confusion. What is it exactly? Myra's eyes stayed on the glowing blue cylinder. It is a power source. With it, an aircraft can fly farther, faster, and quieter than anything in the skies today. In the wrong hands, it could shift the balance of power across nations. Ryan crossed his arms. And they smuggled it onto this plane, hoping no one would notice. Myra looked at him. But they did not expect us. Before Ryan could respond, a loud bang echoed through the cabin. The intruders had not given up. They were making their final move. The loud bang made everyone in the cabin scream. Passengers ducked down in their seats, some covering their heads, others clutching their loved ones. The flight attendants tried to calm them, but the fear spread quickly. Ryan stood inside the cockpit, his eyes sharp. He looked back through the small window in the door. The intruders were forcing their way forward. The leader shouted orders, his face dark with determination. The second man carried a heavy object taken from an overhead bin. The third, who had followed Ryan into the cargo hold earlier, had climbed back up and now rejoined them. Myra placed the glowing core carefully on the control panel. Her hand hovered protectively over it as if it were fragile glass. She spoke quickly to the pilots. Keep the plane steady no matter what happens. If we lose balance, they win. The captain nodded, sweat on his forehead. Understood. Ryan pulled the communicator from his ear and placed it on the console. They're desperate now. They know this is their last chance. Myra glanced at him. They will come straight for the core. We must not let them reach it. The banging grew louder. The intruders were trying to force the cockpit door. It shook under their blows. Passengers gasped each time the sound echoed. Ryan looked at the small locking system near the door. This won't hold forever. Myra's eyes were calm but serious. Then we buy time. She reached into her sleeve and pulled out the slim pen she had hidden earlier. With quick hands, she slid it into the edge of the panel beside the door. Sparks flew, and a secondary lock clicked into place. The door stopped shaking for a moment. The leader outside shouted in anger, hitting the door harder. Ryan gave a small smile. Nice trick. Myra kept her eyes on the door. It won't hold them for long. The second man shouted from the other side, open this door, or you all go down with the plane. Ryan called back firmly, you've already lost. The core is safe. Silence followed, but Ryan could hear their heavy breathing outside. He knew they were planning something else. Inside the cockpit, the co-pilot stared at the glowing blue cylinder. If this really is what you say, shouldn't we get rid of it? Throw it out. Myra shook her head. No. If it falls into the wrong place, it could cause more damage than we can imagine. We must land with it safely. Ryan nodded in agreement. And ground teams will be ready to take it from there. Suddenly, the cockpit lights flickered. Myra turned sharply toward the control panels. They are trying to cut the main power from outside. They know how the system works. The captain's hands flew over the controls, trying to stabilize. They're overriding from the cabin access panels. Myra leaned closer. Not for long. She tapped quickly into the hidden backup lines again, rerouting the systems. The hum of the engine steadied, but Ryan could feel the tension in the air grow heavier. Outside, the leader shouted again, his voice low and dangerous. If we cannot take the core, then no one will. Myra's eyes narrowed. She whispered, he is planning to destroy it. Ryan clenched his fists. He opened the cockpit door slightly to step out, but Myra stopped him with a firm hand on his arm. If you go alone, they will trap you. We need a better plan. Ryan met her eyes. For a brief moment, no words were needed. He understood she was not afraid, not even now. The cockpit door shook again, this time harder. A sharp crack split the air. The secondary lock Myra had made began to fail. Ryan turned to the pilots. When the door breaks, hold the plane steady no matter what. Do not panic. The captain nodded, though his face was pale. Myra picked up the core, holding it close to her chest. They cannot touch this. No matter what. Ryan's eyes narrowed as he positioned himself near the door. Then let them come. The final blow came, and the door burst open. The leader stormed inside with the other two men close behind. Chaos filled the small cockpit space. The passengers in the cabin screamed, though none dared to move forward. The leader's eyes locked on Myra holding the core. He lunged for her. Ryan stepped in fast, blocking him with his shoulder. The impact shook the small space, but Ryan held firm. The second man tried to push past, but Ryan swung his arm and forced him back. The third reached for Myra, but she moved with surprising speed, slipping to the side and keeping the core out of reach. The cramped space made every movement tense and sharp. Ryan fought to keep the intruders from reaching her. Myra stayed calm, shifting around the controls, her arms tight around the glowing cylinder. The leader snarled, his eyes burning. She cannot hold it forever. Give it to us. Ryan's voice was steady even as he struggled. Over my dead body. Myra's voice cut through the chaos, calm and clear. No. Over mine. Her words froze the leader for a brief moment. In that instant, she pressed her hand against the panel on the side of the core. A hidden seal unlocked with a faint click. She pulled a small key-shaped piece from it and held it high. This, she said firmly, is the real control. Without it, the core is useless. The leader's eyes widened. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Ryan pressed forward, forcing the men back toward the broken doorway. The passengers watched with wide eyes as the struggle spilled slightly into the aisle. Myra stood strong inside the cockpit, the key in her hand and the core still glowing on the console. She looked at Ryan and nodded once. Ryan knew then the tide had turned. The intruders had lost their advantage. But the fight was not over yet. The cockpit was tense, but Myra's calm presence steadied the chaos around her. The glowing core rested safely on the console, and the small key in her hand now controlled the full power of the device. The intruders froze, realizing their plan had failed. Ryan pressed the leader against the doorway, his body a wall. "It's over. The core is out of your reach." The leader's eyes blazed with frustration. He lunged one last time, but Ryan sidestepped him, forcing him into the cabin aisle. Passengers gasped but stayed seated, too shocked to move. The second and third men hesitated, unsure how to proceed without their leader gaining control. Myra spoke calmly, her voice carrying over the cockpit speaker. "All systems stable. Reinforcements are on the way. Do not try to interfere further." The leader froze. "Reinforcements?" he asked, doubt creeping into his voice. Ryan smiled grimly. "Yes. Ground teams are tracking this flight. They know who you are and what you tried to do." The intruders looked at each other. Their plan to steal the prototype had failed completely. The flashing lights on the core reminded them of the power they could no longer control. Myra held the key tightly. "This device cannot leave this plane," she said firmly. "It is too dangerous in the wrong hands. If you move, I will lock it permanently." The leader realized there was nothing left to gain. His face darkened with frustration, and he gave a silent nod to his men. Slowly, they backed toward the cabin, hands raised to show surrender. Ryan did not relax until all three were secured by flight attendants and passengers who had bravely helped. The intruders were tied up with seat belts and soft restraints, immobilized but unharmed. Myra looked at Ryan, her eyes still calm. "Good work. You kept them from reaching me." Ryan nodded. "And you kept the core safe. Without you, we would have lost it." The captain of the flight spoke next, his hands still gripping the controls. "What exactly is this thing?" Myra looked at him, her expression serious. "It is a prototype power source. With it, an aircraft can fly farther, faster, and more efficiently than anything in current use. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could be used to make weapons or steal control of airspace." The captain's face paled. "So this whole time, the plane was carrying a device that could change everything?" Myra nodded. "Yes. That is why I was assigned to keep it safe. And now it is secure." Ryan glanced out the small cockpit window. The night sky was calm, the stars twinkling. Below, ground reinforcements were already visible, moving to intercept the plane upon landing. He spoke to Myra quietly. "You handled the real danger. I only delayed them." Myra gave a small smile. "You gave me the time I needed. That counts as a lot." The plane continued steadily through the night. The passengers, though shaken, were beginning to relax as the danger passed. Some whispered words of thanks to Ryan, and others stared in awe at Myra, now sitting calmly beside the pilots. One young passenger approached Ryan carefully. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ryan smiled gently. "Yes. You're safe. The plane and everyone on board will land without harm." Myra tapped the key one last time on the console, ensuring the core was locked and stable. "Once we land, the authorities will take over. No one can misuse this device now." The intruders, subdued and silent, were moved to the back of the plane under the watchful eyes of the crew. Their defeat was complete. The leader had tried everything, but human courage and careful planning had won. Ryan finally sat down for a brief moment, letting his body relax. Myra leaned back as well, her face showing just a hint of relief. "Do you ever sleep normally?" Ryan asked lightly, nodding toward her. Myra chuckled softly. "I do. But tonight, sleep would have been a risk." Ryan smiled. "Well, you handled it all while I was trying to keep them distracted." "Impressive." Myra glanced at the core, then back at Ryan. "We make a good team. I only hope no one ever tries this again." The plane's lights changed as it prepared for landing. The hum of the engines was steady and calm. The passengers could sense the danger had passed, their fear replaced by awe and gratitude. Myra stood, looking out the window at the first lights of the city below. "We're almost there. Everyone will be safe now." Ryan stood beside her. "Yes. You did it, Myra. Tonight, you kept something very powerful from falling into the wrong hands. That is a real difference." She nodded quietly. "It was necessary. And thanks to you, no one was hurt." The plane touched down smoothly, the pilots guiding it expertly with Myra's assistance. On the ground, emergency vehicles awaited, but their presence was not for danger, it was for security. The intruders were handed over to authorities, and the passengers were safely evacuated. Myra finally stepped out of the plane, the cool night air filling her lungs. Ryan followed. For a moment, both of them stood in silence, watching the glowing city lights, the plane behind them now safe and calm. Ryan broke the silence with a smile. "Another day, another impossible mission." Myra chuckled softly. "And another night where someone needed to wake up a pilot." They both laughed lightly, knowing that tonight had tested courage, skill, and calm under pressure. But in the end, human determination and teamwork had won. The night sky remained quiet, the stars shining brightly. Flight 27 had survived, the prototype core was secure, and the passengers were safe. And somewhere inside, Myra allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The world would not know how close it had come to disaster, but she had kept it safe.